They say grief brings families closer, that it softens hard edges and reminds people what truly matters. I believed that, at least I did until my husband Henry passed away. We had spent 45 years together in that house. We built it. With our own hands, raised our only son Nathan within its walls. Every nail, every beam, every memory, it was my life. But grief, it seems, doesn't soften everyone. Just 3 weeks after Henry's funeral, I found myself standing in the living room, holding a battered suitcase, while my son Nathan stared at the floor and his wife, Brooke, crossed her arms tightly over her chest. "I'm sorry, Mom," Nathan mumbled, not daring to meet my eyes. "But, it's better if you find somewhere else to stay. We need our own space now. You understand, right? Understand?" My heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, but Brooke's cold, expectant gaze told me this wasn't a conversation. It was an eviction notice. I had cooked their meals during the morning period. I had kept the house running when neither of them could be bothered. And now, discarded like yesterday's trash, they wanted me gone. No room for Henry's widow. No room for a grieving mother. I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodded stiffly, and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed deep in my bones. Out on the sidewalk, with nothing but a small suitcase and a raging storm of grief and betrayal in my chest, I made a vow. They thought they could throw me away, but I would make sure they never forgot what it felt like to lose everything. The first few nights were the hardest. I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the rougher side of town, the only thing I could afford on my meager savings. The walls were thin, the heater rattled like it was dying, and the view from my window was a back alley littered with trash bins. I spent hours sitting in a wobbly kitchen chair, staring at nothing, the betrayal gnawing at me like a starving animal. Nathan, my son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for. Brooke, the daughter-in-law I had once welcomed with open arms. They didn't just kick me out. They erased me at first. I blamed myself. Maybe I was a burden. Maybe I was old-fashioned. Maybe grief made me too much to handle. I twisted myself in knots trying to make sense of it. But every time I thought about the way Brooke's lip curled in disdain, or how Nathan couldn't even look me in the eye, a different feeling took root. Rage, not the fiery kind that explodes outward. No, this rage was cold, heavy. It settled into my bones and whispered, "They do not deserve everything Henry and I built." That house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was our blood, our sweat, our life. And now it was theirs. Like some trophy they'd won for cruelty. I learned quickly that Nathan had no head for money. Brooke, with her champagne tastes and designer handbags, was bleeding him dry. Mortgage payments were slipping behind. Utilities unpaid. The cracks were forming faster than either of them realized. Every week, while working part-time at a small bakery to make ends meet, I quietly gathered information. I knew the bank handling their mortgage. I knew the amount they owed. I knew that if someone, say, a mysterious third party, were to swoop in and buy their debt, they wouldn't own that house anymore. Henry had always taught me to plan carefully, to move silently, and strike only when the timing was perfect. So that's exactly what I did. I cashed out what little I had in retirement savings. I sold a few heirlooms. I even reached out to an old friend from Henry's construction days, a man now working at the very bank that held Nathan's mortgage. Every penny hurt. Every step forward felt like digging my hands into old scars. But every sacrifice was worth it. Because this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was stolen from me. With interest, the paperwork took weeks. I moved through every step carefully, silently, making sure my name was nowhere visible to Nathan or Brooke. They had no idea what was happening right under their entitled noses. They still thought they were untouchable, living in my house, laughing at the woman they thought they had crushed. The call came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was at the bakery, rolling out dough with hands that had once rocked a baby boy too. "Sleep?" When my phone buzzed, the bank officer's voice was smooth, almost cheerful. "Mrs. Adams," he said, "the transaction has cleared. The property is yours." I pressed my palm flat against the counter to steady myself. It was done. The house, my house, was legally mine again, but I wasn't about to waltz in waving papers. No, that wasn't the plan. They needed to feel it first. 2 days later, a letter arrived at Nathan and Brooke's doorstep. An eviction notice, signed by the new owner. An LLC I had created with the last of my savings, one carefully named so neither of them would recognize my hand behind it. Brooke called me first, voice shrill with rage. "Did you hear?" She screeched without so much as a hello. "Some company bought the house. They're evicting us. Can you believe this crap?" I pressed the phone to my ear, schooling my voice into a low, careful sympathy. "Oh, honey," I said sweetly. "That sounds terrible. I hope you figure something out." I hung up. Before she could spew more poison, I sat there at my tiny kitchen table, the rain hammering against the window, and I laughed. A real belly-deep laugh that shook the loneliness right off me. Brooke and Nathan scrambled, of course. They tried to negotiate with the bank with the management company, but the new owner, me, had firm terms. Vacate the premises within 30 days or face legal action, and here's where fate decided to add its own cruel poetry. Brooke's spending habits had already drained whatever cushion they might have had. The real estate market was tight. Rental prices were soaring. They couldn't find anything decent. Certainly not on Nathan's salary alone. With the eviction clock ticking louder every day, Brooke, ever the problem solver, hatched a new plan. They would rent the house back. They would stay, only now they'd have to pay through the nose to live in the home they had stolen. Imagine their faces when the lease paperwork arrived, outlining the new terms: triple the current mortgage payment, strict late penalties, regular inspections, absolutely no modifications without landlord approval, and then, the cherry on top, the lease clearly stated the property owner had the right to terminate with 60 days notice. For any reason, Brooke called me again that night. I almost didn't answer, but some temptations are too sweet to resist. "Can you believe what they're asking?" she hissed. "It's practically extortion. Nathan says maybe we should just move in with you for a while until we get back on our feet." I set the phone on speaker and leaned back in my chair, savoring every syllable. "Move in with me," I repeated, letting the words hang heavy between us. "After you threw me out of my own home, after you told me I didn't belong." There was a sharp inhale on her end. We didn't mean it like that," Brooke mumbled. "It was a hard time. We were all grieving." "No, Brooke," I said, voice cool as steel. "You made yourselves very clear. I just decided to listen, and then I hung up. No screaming. No revenge fantasy tantrums. Just the cold, satisfying thud of justice landing squarely where it belonged. The house was mine again. Nathan and Brooke would pay dearly month after month to sit under a roof they had tried to steal. And me. I slept better that night than I had in years, because sometimes life doesn't need you to raise hell. Sometimes it just needs you to wait and let the snakes strangle themselves. All you have to do is own the ground they slither on. The first missed payment came faster than I thought. Barely 2 months into the lease, I got the notification: rent unpaid. Grace period expired. Nathan texted me that same day, acting like we were old friends. "Hey, just running a little short this month. Brooke had some unexpected expenses. We'll get it all caught up soon." I didn't respond. I didn't need it to. The lease was airtight when the second month's rent went unpaid. I filed the eviction papers, quiet, efficient. No drama. Brooke showed up at my door the day after the notice was served. Mascara running down her cheeks, blonde hair pulled into a frantic bun. If I didn't know better, I might have thought she looked almost humble. "You can't do this," she sobbed, standing on my porch like a stray cat that had been kicked too many times. "This is Nathan's childhood home. It's all we have left." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I thought. When you threw me out." Her mouth opened and closed, like she couldn't figure out whether to plead or rage. I shut the door in her face before she could decide. 3 weeks later, the sheriff showed up to escort them off the property. I wasn't there for it. I didn't need to see it. Their shame was enough, hanging in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The neighbors talked. Of course, small towns always do. Whispers about Nathan and Brooke, about how they had overextended themselves and lost everything. Not a soul asked what happened to me. No one ever does. That's the thing. About being an old widow, you become invisible right about the time you get interesting. But I didn't care. While they scrambled for a rundown rental across town, I walked through my reclaimed home. My home. With bare feet and a glass of cold lemonade. The walls still bore the scars of their time there. Chipped paint, broken cabinet hinges, a few nasty stains on the carpet, but the bones of the house were strong. Just like me, I started slow, one room at a time. Repainting, repairing, reclaiming. Every brushstroke was an act of defiance. Every nail hammered into the wall was a declaration. You tried to erase me. You failed. In the evenings, I sat on the porch swing with my cats, watching the sunset bleed. Across the sky, the house creaked and settled around me as if it too was sighing in relief. No more false smiles. No more knives hidden behind polite words. Just me, my memories, and a future, finally my own. Brooke and Nathan faded from town. Life after that, I heard rumors. Brooke picked up shifts waitressing at a diner on the highway. Nathan bounced between odd jobs, his pride too bruised to settle anywhere for long. Some said they blamed me for their downfall, said I was vindictive and spiteful. Let them talk. They had built their castle on a foundation of sand and lies. All I did was wait for the tide to come in. Sometimes people think revenge requires action, loud, messy, dramatic. But the best revenge is patience, is silence, is living well when they thought they had buried you. That house had been my dream once. Now it was my monument, not to loss, but to survival, to strength, to a woman who refused to be erased by anyone, not even her own blood. And as I sat there one evening, sipping my lemonade while the cicadas screamed their summer song, I realized something. I didn't just win. I conquered. Owning the house again wasn't enough. It couldn't just be about reclaiming bricks and mortar. It had to be about reclaiming myself. I spent the first few weeks doing things I hadn't allowed myself to enjoy in years. Mornings were for long walks down the old dirt roads, where the wildflowers grew tall and unruly. Afternoons were for iced tea and mystery novels on the back porch. Letting the world move without me for once. The silence that used to crush me now wrapped around me like a soft blanket. There was no one left to tell me I wasn't enough. Number 1, to belittle the small joys. No one to sigh dramatically when I laughed too loud or asked too many questions. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. It was freedom. But I knew myself too well to stay idle for long. One evening, as I was sorting through a box of old things in the attic, I found a worn, leather-bound notebook. Inside were sketches, designs for quilts, patterns for embroidery, ideas for handmade goods that I'd once dreamed of selling at local markets before life got in the way. The idea struck like lightning. What if I didn't just reclaim my home? What if I reclaimed my dreams too? The next morning I drove into town and leased a small booth at the local craft fair. It was nothing glamorous, just a folding table, a white tent, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Willow's Nest, handmade with heart." I started small. Patchwork pillows, embroidered tote bags, delicate lace bookmarks. Each piece felt like stitching a part of myself back together. Each sale felt like a whisper of validation. At first I was terrified no one would care, that I'd sit there all day under the hot sun with nothing but pitying glances and awkward smiles. But slowly, something incredible happened. People came. They came because they wanted something real. They came because, like me, they were tired of mass-produced junk that had no soul. They wanted something made with hands and heart, and I had both in spades. One afternoon, as I was helping a young woman pick out a quilt for her baby's nursery, she said, "You can feel the love in your work. It's different." I nearly cried right there behind the booth. Word spread. Orders picked up. I started an online shop learning how to ship my creations across the country. A retired neighbor helped me build a little website. Another friend taught me how to set up a booth at seasonal festivals. Soon, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Without Nathan, without Brooke, without anyone who thought they could write me off and bury me quietly. And the house, my beautiful, stubborn house, thrived. Too. It wasn't a mausoleum for old grief anymore. It was alive again, buzzing with the hum of sewing machines and the warm scent of fresh-baked bread cooling on the counter. It was the home it was always meant to be, a place of creation, of laughter, of peace. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection in the dark window pane. Not the worn-down, apologetic woman who once crept through her own halls like an intruder. Not the forgotten widow cast aside like an old coat. No, now. I saw a woman who had taken every broken thing they left behind and built something better with her own two hands. And when the seasons turned and the fall festivals rolled into town, I set up my booth right in the heart of the main square. I watched the leaves tumble from the trees, felt the crispness in the air, and smiled. Because I knew, deep in my bones, this life is mine. Every hard-earned, beautiful inch of it. And no one will ever take it from me again. It started with a knock on the door, soft, hesitant. The kind of knock that made your stomach tighten, even when you didn't know why. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and peered through the window. Nathan, and Brooke standing slightly behind him, arms crossed, face pinched like she'd sucked a lemon. For a moment I considered not answering. For a moment I thought about letting them stew on the porch in the cool evening air. But no, I wanted to see what lies they had cooked up. I wanted to look them both in the eye. I pulled the door open and leaned casually against the frame. "Can I help you?" I asked. Voice light, sweet as tea. Nathan cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. Brooke refused to meet my gaze. "Typical mom," Nathan said. We heard you bought the house, and that you started some kind of business?" His words hung there, thick and stupid in the fading light. "I didn't start it," I said, smiling politely. "I built it. Big difference." Brooke finally looked up at me, and oh, how the bitterness in her eyes almost made me laugh. Her mouth tightened, but she said nothing. Nathan pressed on, clearly rehearsed. "We were thinking, maybe we could come by more often. Maybe even move back in for a little while until we get back on our feet." I raised one eyebrow. Back on your feet? I echoed. Yeah, Nathan mumbled, scratching the back of his neck. The market's tough. Brooke's boutique closed. My job's been ... Well, you know. I did know. I knew they'd burned through the money Brooke pressured him to waste. I knew their fancy condo downtown was foreclosed 3 months ago. I knew Brooke's parents had washed their hands of them. The vultures had run out of carcasses, and now they were circling back to me. Well, I said, leaning in just slightly, I'm sorry to hear that. And I meant it, but not in the way they wanted. Not with an open door and a warm invitation. Not anymore. Nathan's face fell, sensing the shift. Brooke scowled. You have plenty of room, she snapped. The sweet facade finally slipping. You're sitting here all alone in this big house while we're struggling? Ah, I said softly. So that's what this is about. Not family, not love, real estate. Brooke opened her mouth again, but I cut her off with a small shake of my head. I do have a big house, I said. And you know what's funny? I like it empty, peaceful, quiet, full of love. All the things you two never brought into it. Nathan's eyes widened, like he couldn't believe I was actually saying it. Like the idea that his mother could have boundaries was unthinkable. Mom, come on, he said, voice cracking. It's not like we meant to, but you did, I said, sharp. Now. You meant to throw me out after your father died. You meant to take everything he and I built and toss it away like garbage. You meant to humiliate me, Nathan. You just didn't mean for it to backfire. The silence that fell between us was thick and sour. Brooke's voice, high and nasal, broke it. This is ridiculous. You're being petty, maybe, I said. Or maybe I finally learned how to value myself. I smiled then, wide and genuine, and for the first time in years, I meant it. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your free ride. You made your choices. Now live with them? Nathan's face crumpled. Brooke grabbed his arm, tugging him back toward the car. You don't need her, she hissed. Loud enough for me to hear. She's a bitter old woman. We'll figure it out without her. I stood in the doorway, watched them retreat down the front steps, watched the dust kick up behind their beat-up car as they sped away, watched them vanish into the distance, small, angry figures swallowed up by the setting sun. And when the dust settled and the night crept in, I closed my door with a soft, satisfying click. Locked it. The house felt different after they left, lighter somehow, as if it had been holding its breath for too long, and finally, it could exhale. I stood in the living room, bathed in the soft amber glow of the setting sun, and let the quiet settle into my bones. No more anxious glances toward the door. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was just me now. Me and this beautiful, stubborn life I'd rebuilt from the ashes they thought they'd left me in. I spent the next few days doing exactly what I wanted, exactly how I wanted. Cooking dinners too big for one person and savoring every bite. Rearranging furniture. Planting a tiny herb garden out back. Because, why not? Because this space was mine. Because my joy didn't need permission. Anymore, sometimes I caught myself smiling at nothing. At the sound of the coffee machine humming in the morning. At the feeling of fresh sheets as I slid into bed at night. At the way peace, real solid peace, wrapped itself around me like a blanket. Nathan never called again. Brooke, of course, didn't either, and honestly, I didn't miss them. Not the way I thought I would. Grief was still there. Sure, a dull ache that would probably never fully leave, but it didn't control me anymore. It didn't sit in the driver's seat of my life. One evening, as the sky bled orange and pink across the horizon, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the waves roll against the shore in the distance. The air smelled like salt and possibility. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for permission to be free. Family, the place we think will always be a safe haven, is sometimes the place that hurts us the most. What do you think about her actions in the story? Leave a comment to share your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to join us in emotional life stories.